Hello and welcome to the final episode of the first season of my show, Some White Guy Mansplains Intersectional Feminism with Jake Ryan. I'm your host, Jake Ryan, and as we close out this series, I want to touch on a few things that will be the primary focus of this episode. Capitalism, climate change, the US's place on the world stage, and our interconnectedness. I began this series with an episode on white supremacy and named that systems of oppression like white supremacy and colonialism thrive on attacking our connection to ourselves and to each other. We really are all one, but we live in a society that has strategically made us think of ourselves in highly individualistic terms, and, more than that, it makes us think that this is a good thing. Climate change is real, and Israel, bombing the fuck out of the whole Middle East, is rapidly warming the globe even more, which affects people the world over. The global North doesn't care enough about the global South, and the US specifically has centered itself on the world stage, even though the American people only make up 4% of the world's population. Take a moment to think about that. We all have our own fears and anxieties about daily life and the collapsing American empire, and capitalism has us all in a chokehold. But at the end of the day, the US makes up such a small part of the whole globe. The whole world is affected by American elections and the choices that this country makes. The US is an imperial state, and many luxuries that are afforded to Americans come at the cost of people of color being exploited in other countries. We're fed lies about other people's deservingness of such maltreatment, and we reap the benefits. And as things get worse around here, one of the most important messages that I see echoed in certain corners of social media is that we need each other. We don't need the kind of government that we have lived under, and in fact, they've proven that they do not care about us or what we want. Empire only ever wants to expand, and it does so through increasingly violent means. So, I know that was a lot to start an episode, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that what we have ahead of us is some incredibly difficult conversations. I work as a therapist and have done so since 2018, and the essence of my work is helping people to have the conversations that they need to be having to create the life that they want. This country claims to want progress, and yet is so unwilling to reckon with its past and even its present. Again, echoing what I said in the first episode, the only way to handle the privilege that comes with these systems of oppression is to numb out to your experience. The systems are dehumanizing. Capitalism is not just about profit. It's about profit at literally any cost, including countless millions of people. These systems other people in a desperate attempt to justify such dehumanizing behavior. No human deserves to be abused or exploited for any reason, ever. If you think that there is a justification for this, I need you to get critical around where that idea comes from. What information is that belief or attitude based on? Who benefits from you believing that? What if someone thought the same of you or someone you love? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't like to think critically. James Baldwin said it best. He said, "I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense, once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain." And, as I said, It causes us a lot of pain to hurt others because we are all connected. The privilege I have as an American is at the expense of other people around the world. The privilege I have as a man is at the expense of women's safety and that of people of other genders. The privilege I have as a white person is at the expense of non-white people, both in the US and globally. And even if there weren't all these disparities built in, we'd still be interconnected. We're all human, and humans are communal creatures. Another quote I love is by Thomas Merton, who said, "Our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy." It's interesting to me because I was raised Catholic and went to Catholic school for many years, where I was taught this idea that all human life has equal value and that we have a responsibility towards social justice. For a country that many like to call a Christian nation, the US often fails to act in ways the Jesus I was taught about would approve of. Jesus was born in Palestine, in Nazareth, and he was brown, Jewish, critical of the rich, and hated hypocrites. This Jesus was also critical of people who only did good deeds publicly for recognition, and he treated women with respect. My siblings and I had to go to church every single Sunday, and we always got the impression that many churchgoers were more concerned with being seen going to church than with just being a good person. I also remember being told that we only get this one go around, and wouldn't you rather live your life as though there was a heaven and hell and then find out there wasn't, rather than living your life like there wasn't and finding out there was? But I never liked this idea that we only got one chance. And as I got older, it felt like an even more ludicrous idea, because everyone on Earth has a different experience depending on the body and place that they're born into. In college, I learned about Sikhism and its belief that our souls must experience many, many lifetimes to learn all that we need to learn. I like this idea a lot more, and I think if more people were willing to consider it, they might have more empathy. If you are in the US and you're listening to this, especially if you're pro-Israel and think that Palestine and Lebanon and Syria deserve how they're being treated, consider that it was just random luck that you were born into this country and not into one of the countries that's currently being bombed. If the Sikhs are right, for all we know, you did live in one of those countries in a recent past life. If you die next week, who's to say you won't be born into the Middle East next, or Congo, or any other place the US is either committing or aiding genocide to maintain our way of life? Why should your life matter more than anyone else's? What if their life was just as much worth saving as you might think yours is? What if they were just as deserving of joy, of peace, of a full life? I want to critique capitalism here real fast, and then we'll talk about what a way forward looks like. Capitalism is incompatible with humanity. We are supposed to be able to enjoy our lives, to do things we enjoy doing, and spend time with people we care about. People shouldn't have to work 60 hours a week just to make ends meet, and the fact that they do and it still isn't enough is a problem. Stress and exhaustion weaken the immune system, leading to bigger, more expensive problems down the line, which capitalism is all too willing to profit on. The point is cruelty. We have computers and other incredibly efficient machines that can do work in a fraction of the time it took people decades ago to do. Studies also show that employees who work 40 hours a week are generally only productive about 40% of that time. In a better world, this increased efficiency would mean more leisure time for people, but capitalism literally doesn't want us to have that. People who aren't overworked and underpaid have time to organize and push for better conditions, and the ruling class don't want that. The cruelty is the point. The ultra-rich, those with multiple billions to their name, believe they are truly better than us, and they don't want us to be happy or healthy, just to add to their bottom line and produce some offspring to also add to their bottom line before we drop dead. I've mentioned numerous times that these systems of oppression are interlocking. When I talk about white heteropatriarchal capitalism, I'm talking about the systems that help heterosexual white men thrive at the expense of all others. A person who looks like me shouldn't stand any better of a chance than anyone else at succeeding, or even surviving in this world. When I succeed, I'd prefer for it to be on merit than simply because I'm lucky enough to be a white man. And speaking of being white, people often hear white privilege and think that if they're poor, they must not have it. As motivational speaker Les Brown puts it, white people have the complexion of connection, while black people have the complexion of rejection. White privilege opens many doors for white people that aren't open to non-white people, but it certainly doesn't guarantee success and riches. The most I've ever made in a year is $31,000, but I know it isn't immigrants' fault, or Jewish people, or women, or trans people's fault that I haven't yet experienced greater financial success. It's capitalism, which rewards the few at the expense of the many, and the ultra-rich are all too happy that poor white people believe that scapegoated others are truly the ones to blame for their poverty. Some white people who voted for Trump are proudly racist, while some, I think, simply got manipulated. For decades, they've heard about efforts at DEI and affirmative action, and they got the impression that this country only cares about minorities these days. Cis-het white men feel left out because they don't hear about any social programs or anything for their demographic, because the benefits they get from white supremacy and cis heteropatriarchy are made invisible to them. The bottom 50% of the US only collectively holds 3% of the nation's wealth, and white supremacy's pressure to disconnect from our feelings helps us to not notice how miserable capitalism is making us. A lot of people would rather blame minoritized people than acknowledge how much they're hurting and why. These systems work together to keep us stuck and hopeless. Many Americans have numbed out, and it's hard to bring your feelings back online after doing so. Like when your legs fall asleep when you're on the toilet too long, it's an uncomfortable feeling to wake up again, but there's no way around it. We need to connect with our pain and our rage and come together to create meaningful change. These systems thrive on our disconnectedness and the fear-mongering perpetuated by news outlets like Fox News. Even though trans people make up at most 2% of the population, they are blamed for ruining the American way of life. A study showed that the primary determining factor in how people feel about trans people is whether they actually know someone who is trans. If you live in an insular town that's 80 to 90% white and all you know about diversity is the lies that you hear from Fox News, it's easier to believe that people crossing the southern border and trans people are a threat. But as Brene Brown says, people are hard to hate close up. Move in. Monica Lewinsky gave a great TED Talk about how her experience was shaped by being the first news story that was discussed more heavily online than through print and television. She points out that it's incredibly hard to say hateful things to a person's face because you have to take ownership of those words and you can see the way that you've hurt that person. We used to have to interact with each other face to face a lot more, and now many people's interactions are primarily online and, as a result, are often divisive. When all you think you know about other people is what you see online, you don't really know other people. When you know trans people or immigrants, it's easy to see that they're just people with their own hopes and dreams and who want a better life for their loved ones. The US is an empire in collapse, and as these systems fail us more and more, we're going to need each other even more. We have to turn off the news and love our neighbors. They are us, and we are them. All people deserve to live and die with dignity, whether they live in the Congo or Palestine or are a person of any color in the US. And the only politics I care about are the ones that approach all of humanity with equal respect. The US calls itself a democracy, but it's clearly just an oligarchy under a thin veil of democracy, and it does not care about the needs of the average American. There isn't anyone else coming to save us. We have to save ourselves, and we need each other in order to make that happen, which is why these systems of oppression want so badly for us to believe that we're not interconnected. Genocide and other forms of oppression have, unfortunately, been going on in various places throughout history, but the past year has highlighted how little power most Americans actually have. In the movie V for Vendetta, we're reminded that governments should be afraid of their people, not people afraid of their governments. When our government has sold out and is willing to let a few corporations poison the entire planet, when it deliberately fails to prepare for and respond to a pandemic like COVID or whatever is coming next as a result of global warming, they've proven that we don't need them. Our government is more a hindrance than a help at this point. Capitalism is an illness, propped up by our sad excuse for government, and we deserve to live in a world that values human life. What that looks like isn't up to me or people who look like me. Seriously. We've been doing it this way for so long, and look where it's gotten us. These systems are dehumanizing. I feel like I can't repeat that enough. We have to reconnect with our humanity, and the people who have been most harmed by these systems are, in fact, best suited to envision a more compassionate world. The world was made what it is today by people who look like me, for people who look like me, and they only ever saw people of color as a means to an end. The people who were pushed out of the way the most under our current system are more capable of creating an inclusive world than those who look like me. Many non-Western cultures, including the indigenous people who lived on this land before the colonizers got here and brutally imposed their way of life, experience a greater connection to others and to nature. They saw humans as part of nature and lived as stewards of the land, whereas capitalists, empowered by colonialism, see natural resources as theirs for the taking, and are killing people and the planet to line their pockets. Isn't it more likely that we're all here on Earth to take care of each other and not to waste our lives being exploited to make a few white guys incomprehensibly rich? Literally every part of our society is structured around maintaining whiteness as the standard. The DSM even, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, was created primarily by white men and through their biased perspective. It pathologizes LGBT people and people of color, so it's no wonder that minoritized people might seem to suffer greater degrees of mental illness. Hannah Gadsby questions why we don't view misogyny as mental illness, and non-white mental health activists have considered what the DSM might look like if it weren't written through the mental illness of white supremacy. I hate when I see people talk about the prevalence of mental illness among LGBT people and people of color as though it is inevitable and not a direct result of living in a world that tells us we're incorrect. Near the end of Nanette, Hannah Gadsby says that the only people who lose their humanity are those who believe they have the right to render another human being powerless. They are the weak. Systems of oppression grant some the right to render others powerless, and there are still too many people that support these systems, that defend them, and think they're worth maintaining. They aren't. And the more privileged you are under these systems, the greater your responsibility to name and work to dismantle these systems. That's why I'm speaking up here. Although marginalized people typically have a greater awareness of how the world operates than those with more privilege, they don't owe you emotional and intellectual labor. It isn't people of color's job to teach white people how their beliefs and actions regularly harm them, nor is it their job to hold our hands and make us feel better. We have a lot to reckon with, and many difficult discussions ahead of us. So we need to do the hard work of deprogramming our minds and spirits so that we can hold space for the pain we have knowingly and unknowingly inflicted upon marginalized others. In doing so, we can start to reconnect to our humanity and to others. We all have our role in creating a better future. Use whatever privilege and platform you have, even if it's just calling out the people in your life when they defend dehumanization. Beyoncé has different forms of privilege than I do, and she uses her platform to lift up other Black women because she knows they're regularly overlooked in the US. Some small-minded people like to call it reverse racism, which isn't a thing, and is just an excuse to expect too much of Black women and hold them far more accountable than they would ever hold a white man. While I don't have Beyoncé's level of reach and cultural influence, I'm doing what I can with what I have. I'm almost done with my PhD, and I was able to get it because student loan providers see my name and believe that I have great potential to earn enough money to pay them back. My education has helped me to gain a greater understanding of how this world operates, and I believe I have a personal responsibility to help educate others, especially highly privileged people, and show them how to do the work of challenging systems of oppression. Your role in creating a better future is going to be different than Beyoncé's and different than mine, and it's your responsibility to figure out what that looks like. Like it or not, you do have a responsibility to others. White supremacy sells us on individualism, the idea that we don't owe each other anything, and it's a lie. We do. We have to take care of each other because each other is all we have. We also don't truly achieve anything on our own. Everything I know and everything I've shared across this season has been because of great minds that came before me and amazing friends who support me and cheer me on. Our success is not earned individually, and neither is our liberation. I hope this series has been helpful for you. I hope you found it thought-provoking and that it pulled back the curtain so that you could see things more clearly. I hope that it's got you thinking about what you can contribute to the world. For more support, check out the resources linked under any of the episodes in this series. In the resources for this episode, I've included a link for my book, You Don't Need a Therapist. This book is a pretty quick read that teaches you some perspective shifts from 10 different models of therapy to help you start to think differently about yourself and the world around you. As George Lee Jr., who goes by The Conscious Lee on social media says, education is elevation. You don't need to get my same level of education to make a difference, but we all have some learning to do, and I'm here to help. Thank you for being here.